Welcome to Innovators, a series where we sit down with thought leaders in the healthcare technology space to talk about news and trends that are impacting our industry today. My name is Justine Giancola. I'm on the corporate communications team here at Inovalon, and joining me today is Patrick Kovalik from Snowflake. Thank you so much for being here, Patrick.
Hi, Justine. Thanks for having me. As you said, I'm Patrick Kovalik. I'm with Snowflake. I'm one of our industry principals. I drive strategy and outcomes for our payer, our provider, and our health tech space. I've worked in healthcare my whole life. I came from a big payer before Snowflake, and this is what I do. So glad to talk about data myths in healthcare and the evolution of AI. It was a pretty exciting topic. Looking forward to it. Thanks again for having me.
Of course. So today we are going to talk about some of the data myths in healthcare. The explosion of data in healthcare has lagged other industries, but now that it's here, healthcare organizations are tasked with getting the most out of their data and figuring out where to weave in AI. So with some organizations still focusing on breaking those data silos by collecting more data and restructuring their data, why is that not quite enough?
And how long do we have for this? It's definitely not enough. I mean, I love that question. Um, candidly, data is the foundation for everything. I mean, it's the table stakes. It's the necessary requirement. I think in my career or my life, I've never met a data analyst. I've never met a real business leader that ever says, "I have enough data to do my job." But to get data into usable formats, to become information, to become outcomes, this is my world. This is where we talk about data strategy as the core for anything. And when you have the silos to create a barrier of time or even just restriction, it challenges all that. So just the volume of organizations, they're now ready and wanting to have more data to do true collaborative exchange. It's just the data that they have first party is just typically not enough to fit their need, or at least not where they want it to be. So that's where I see just organizations have definitely in recent times just woken up and realized they can't keep working in a vacuum. They can't just say, "Hey, it's my world and I own it." They got to start working together. And so and again, thanks for having me. Coming from Snowflake, we're a cloud-based data platform. This is our mantra. This is our mission. Never let the size of the data, the volume, the formats become a blocker to be able to let two sides get the value that they need across their data. So I think that's the big shift is not just removing the barriers to get to it, but building the trust, building the transparency, so that both sides can see the full lineage, of where the data came from, how it's being used, how it's putting more trust into those outputs. So a lot of that is the kind of the foundation. So great question, but that's the shift. And healthcare is by far one of the most unique industries in just how big and expansive and explosive and different the data is, whether it's operational, clinical, claims, auths, patient data, member data, provider data, broker data. It's like we could probably have a whole podcast on just what are the types of data in healthcare. So I think just the smile there when you said that is an organization just can't sit around expecting for data to be in their format. If you're waiting for it to be ready to use at the point, you're gonna miss. So that's where we fit in, and that's how we try to help organizations that don't have time to wait for the data. How do you get it in and make it accessible to your business users so that they can use it when, where, how they want to use it, not just that problem of, "Hey, Justine, can I get that report?" And you say, "Sure, give me 8 weeks." It just doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah, people need things, we need things fast. I think that's across the
Yeah.
board. But kind of moving into data models, let's talk a little bit about that. Many experts are advising that the right model is fundamental to getting the best analytics. Are there times that those models maybe can't be trusted?
Um, yeah, I mean, you guys probably live this too. It's just, and again, even the term model, look at how many ways that people listening to this podcast could interpret, like, "Hey, what does she mean by a data model?" Because it could be an AI model, it could be just a traditional, warehouse model. It could be how you get it. So it's just, the more you get comfortable into data feeds, the riskier it is because you end up holding yourself like into that one mindset. Models have to always be challenged and be reevaluated. If you build your data model based on how you get your data from an application, that's kind of how you're always going to look at data. If you build your model around a platform that presents it in that format, again, you get influence. So I think some of that's maybe where I was going when you brought up that question of the risk of the models, because ultimately, that's the explosion of AI that we have now today. Is you can't build an AI model on bad data, or it's just set up for failure. So the right model means you know, users don't need to know like how the language works, how the AI, the Gen AI model works. They just want to be able to get to the insights they want at the speed they want, not how it's set up. And that's kind of the bridge of. And again, forgive me for some of the Snowflake conversation, but that's where we always say, hey, any AI strategy requires that solid data strategy. So with that, that means your model needs to be flexible enough to grow, to evolve with the core tenets of you being able to know, hey, where did my data come from? How is it going to be used? Is it first party? Is it third party? Is it enriched? Um, and then just maybe my last theme of like some of the risk is models just can't be designed only, by traditional IT resources. You really have to have the business input. There's so much power and scale in having a mix on both sides of knowing how technically it needs to be set up and stored and modeled, but then also the why from the business user, even input, from the patient, from the clinician, from the payer of, hey, what am I going to do with this? And then that's how the two really work well, because then you have the flexibility that it's going to be stored in a usable way, but also accessed quickly and governed effectively. So I think, anyway, just curious if that's where you're going, but I think that's the tough part of. I think even you and I had talked about that a while ago. It's just a lot of companies that are they're nervous. They're like, well, what model should I use? And I think that's the stuff that kind of like you got to start, but have a model, like embrace the flexibility you're going to need because your data is going to grow.
Yeah. Right. No, and I think that's exactly the direction we're kind of going here. You're hitting on these risks of AI, but AI specific to healthcare. Can we talk a little bit more about that? What would you say the biggest risk specific to the healthcare space would be?
Yeah, there sure are many. The explosion of AI is came pretty fast. Or came pretty hot. I mean, I sometimes make some. I mean, you can't have a conversation today in healthcare or a podcast like this, tech, data, healthcare, without AI being brought up. Which back, especially even just weeks ago, days, quarters ago, a lot of organizations were struggling about how do I get an AI strategy or even just that AI outcome without first having a game plan, a data strategy or an AI strategy. It was kind of the explosion, the sexiness of AI. You could just see companies being like, hey, I need something by Monday. The board's asking, or I want to stay competitive. And I think now you can kind of look backwards and smile and just be like, oh my gosh, like I like that it's actually reset. And now you are back at the value of AI and the power of it. But you see the need to have a clean data strategy, a clean then usage strategy, a clean, accessibility strategy, so that won't be used just for the sake of saying, hey, I applied AI. And that's where, and again, Snowflake lends perfectly with that. Is AI is not meant to be a separate silo where, hey, I have data foundations here and then AI and that fun gets happened over here, similar to like my medical data here and my behavioral or my dental or my vision or my life over here. You need to have one common, a governed platform, and those data protections and the clinical security, that's what Snowflake brings. I think that's probably the biggest true risk that gets discussed a lot with AI is just how sensitive the decisions are when you get into clinical data. So decision making as the final outcome. I kind of say that we're on a podcast, everybody, but with air quotes, because that's a worry today is having AI just become the decision maker. The value of AI can be used to present back the metrics of why that model recommended a decision, whether it's operational or clinical. The speed of being able to tell Justine, hey, here's why we think that this is medical necessity, or this should be a next best action, or this is an adjustment of a care plan or a new pharmacy plan. That speed is what's so valuable, but that still lets the human touch of patient care and patient outcomes never be replaced. It just improve the efficiency across the system to round up the data, round up my bullet points that you would have made that decision and present that. And I think that's kind of where the risk of AI is being mitigated a lot right now. Is companies that I work with, they're starting on data sets that are a little bit less clinical, less protected, so that they can fully experiment at what AI could do. And then they have a framework ready to know how they can use it, scale it, deploy it. And when they move then into, clinical notes, physician notes, things like that. It's they're more prepared, and then they can present back those things that almost just gives even the person, whether it's the clinician or an operational staff, the confidence to go, you know what, I missed that one point because I hadn't tagged it, and now they can see it, and then they're even more empowered. So I think that's where the shift of like the explosion into now the risk mitigation is what we see a lot. I know definitely for me, I do.
Yeah, and I think that leads perfectly into, you said we've seen this explosion, we've seen these very fast advancements as it relates to AI in healthcare. But looking at the data analytics that come with all of this, what do you think is next for healthcare with, looking at data, looking at this reporting?
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, candidly, it's also why I love watching where Inovalon's going is you guys are pushing that front of what can we do more and bringing it all together. I mean, that actually bringing it all together. I mean, heck, I mean, start there, bringing the data to the customers who need it with speed, with availability. And what I like too is, of why I respect Inovalon so much is again, it's across the different sectors. It's across what health plans need for say quality and risk, blended into life sciences or, bio and pharma, into provider and physician and clinician care delivery. It's all still anchored, with the patient, with those outcomes. And the more that story can be stitched together, that's kind of like the roadmap that if you would have if you would have asked me that still even 20, 40 years ago, we probably would have had a similar answer because just the longevity of who is Patrick and what's my care plan, what has it been and where is it today and where is it going to be. I mean, that's the beauty of the patient. We are constantly changing, and so the data has to change and evolve, to give that story with it. So I think that's what organizations need: more access to the data, and they need it down to, a record level. They need it, they need it high level, but they also need to drill down so they can understand both the holistic patient journey and the overall wellness, but also, the depth of like what pieces were trigger points. And then I think just, the other explosion, and again, speaking from the heart, I mean, unstructured data is probably the biggest, frontier, the biggest value prop right now. I mean, it's everywhere, audio, video, documents, images, faxes. I mean, this will become a podcast. I mean, a lot of people will just, stream this and think about it, but somewhere there will be an AI layer that then also plays it back and maybe says, hey, what was the most passionate sentiment of your response or your question or my answer? Like that's awesome analytics, and that is both to listen to a podcast or to help something operationally, but also to deliver on care. So that I mean, the punchline there just is the data isn't always pretty, but some of the best meat for what insights you need to deliver better care, they're buried in context that is unstructured today. So that's probably where I see as the biggest value to all the parties that we were just talking about. And then back to you guys, and then back to Snowflake, and why I like that we get to come together as partners is we've proven it's possible to aggregate, to analyze, to act on that data, with speed and with volume and with security, at volumes that are just candidly bigger than most companies see individually. So it's almost like giving them kind of a voice of it can be done. You can get into just structured traditional data for reports that are pretty comfortable, and then you can also get into that next gen of AI and forecasting and predictions, and then ultimately influencing the care that you want to happen. So I think that's where we're going. And other than that, let's do this again next week, and I'll have an even more evolved answer because that's the beauty. It's always going to evolve, and so you need to be able to have it evolve with you.
Yeah, I mean, I look back to even some of our first innovator sessions were around AI in healthcare, and that was about a year ago. And the way that conversation has evolved in the last year has been really cool to watch. Wonderful to sit down with people like you. But I'm really happy that you kind of tied it back into the outcomes, because we talk so much about data and technology, and it's this more technical speak. But at the end of all of it is there are people, there are outcomes. There is so much good that can be done based on all the work that companies like, Inovalon and Snowflake are doing. So
you're always very good at that. You remind me, hey, at the end of all that mess, there's always a human at the end of it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, that kind of wraps up my questions for today. It was always great to sit down and talk to you. I'm sure we'll have some more to share in the coming months, but thank you for being here today. And to everyone who is joined in watching this podcast, thank you so much. Be on the lookout for our next innovator session coming soon.